Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports as the Lions have just beaten the Sharks 43 points to 40, an 82nd minute penalty from Tiaan Swaanpeoel, the only difference between the two sides in the preparation series in a match where it was very much for me it just felt like a typical preseason game where players didn't necessarily look fit enough or were quite up to scratch, but also in terms of a lot of the tries and a lot of the points came from areas and sort of basic areas that you wouldn't expect to see from some of these sort of players, and especially, from fresh teams like this, which is a little bit concerning because the Rainbow Cup is, just a couple of weeks away. But that is the whole point of the preparation series. It's teams that made of players who don't necessarily play with each other a lot. And the biggest sort of concern is that there's only one more round of this preparation series, only one more chance for these players to play with each other and start gelling and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of concern in that sort of regard, and I think that was something that Sean Everett, the Sharks coach, actually mentioned. The fact that these players don't play with each other a lot, and that shows because they're just not quite, they're not just quite gelling together. Before you sort of break down the match, also a match where I think refereeing decisions are going to cause quite a lot of stir, and a couple of things that I want to talk about as well, just in terms of the rules and the interpretation of the rules and kind of where it stands, and a couple of things because we're seeing a lot of different things being blown and it's causing quite a lot of debate in terms of the validity of certain laws and how it's being officiated at the moment. Before we do that, please do subscribe to the channel, smash a like on the video as well. Let me know what you thought of the game. I'm on both sort of sets of supporters groups, and both sets of supporters were complaining that the referee was being biased towards against their team. So you win some, you lose some. The referee is always going to be a center point. But before we get to Rasta and a couple of things I want to talk about. Basic errors, I think, were probably the biggest sort of standout for me, just in terms of two tries being scored from overthrows, at the line-out. Dylan Richardson came on and threw one straight over into the hands of Jan-Henning Kampfer, who literally just grabbed the ball, almost was about to go over, and this pack came forward and put him down. And I think if you look a little bit later, I think it was Tuka Mkuna's first try, where it was a throw over the top, and they one or two phases and they scored. And you can't have that sort of error at this sort of game. You cannot be sitting there just throwing the ball to the opposition on your 5 meter. Those are basic errors. You look at some of the first tries and they were just basic counter-attacking tries where they're just 1, 2, 3 too easy around them, and there's always an overlap. Both the Tiaan Swaanpeoel try and the Apelele Fantasy try were very similar in that it was just, for me, it was just too easy. A couple of passes and in and around the area. We did see some knock-ons. I mean, we saw Penke knock the ball on. We probably would have gone to score. We wanted to see the Similani come up right at the end with cramp and was going to go over until he sort of lost his footing. So it's probably a fair result in terms of the Lions winning, because I thought that they were overall probably the better side. I think the Sharks had some very good moments, and both sides had some good moments and some positive and negatives. But the Lions, fell asleep and allowed the Sharks back in far too easily. That Ntuka brace, the first try, line over the top, and the second one was a fantastic marauding run by him. But for me, you've got to look at the defenders, and Tiaan Swaanpeoel kind of ran towards him and then sort of accompanied him to the try line. I was very, very worried about the lack of effort there was to try and stop him. I mean, he ran a great line and he's got so much pace. You can see he's a former number 8. It was a brilliant try. I'm not taking anything away from him, but there wasn't even an attempt to tackle on him. I thought that was pretty poor. Apart from that, there were a couple of nice moves. I thought the Vintage Tuka try was very nice, where they spot some space. A nice inside ball from Similani to Alton Yankees, who then found, I think it was Willem van der Sluys, and then in for Tuka. I thought Dylan Richardson came on, struggled a bit at hooker, and I think that we saw another game where you can understand why they're trying to convert into flank, or why they think his future might be at flank, because his line-out throwing is not good enough. And there were even sort of a time where Ruster was pretty much blaming him for being the reason why there was no stability at scrum time, because he said that everything was fine until he came on in place of Dan Euster, who was stretched off. Hopefully he is all right. But having said that, he then also scored 2 tries, one off the back of the maul, and one solo try. Something I want to speak about. So let's talk about Rasta Rashavenga. The fact of the matter is we had 83 points in the game. So I think that speaks a lot about the type of game. It was very open. It was a bit messy. It was a bit, the tackling wasn't great. It wasn't very tight. It was very much a preseason game for me. That's when you see these sort of scorelines. Preseason, players throwing the ball around, tackling not quite there, defensive structures a little bit everywhere. And today was very much like that. But I want to talk about Rasha who got quite a few calls wrong, I think. I think for both sides. I think, there are lots of supporters who are going to slam him and say he missed forward pass for the Sharks, he missed forward pass for the Lions, he missed this, he missed that. That try shouldn't have stood, that try should have stood. But I'm going to start with that Willem Albert's penalty on the brink of half time, and the Sharks didn't score from it. But Willem Alberts was penalised for a swinging arm where Lukhanyo Ahmed swiveled out of a tackle and he had run into another player. And, you could see Willem Alberts was trying to line up quite a decent hit to try and put him on the back so he could try and get over the ball. And, kind of got him like this. But for me, and I think there was contact, but there was also a handoff on Lukhanyo Ahmed, which, sometimes prevents the rest of the body coming through. And for me, it's such a difficult sort of grey area at the moment because lots of players are being penalised and carded for no arm tackles where the arm doesn't wrap. And at the same time, now lots of players are being penalised for swinging arm, where the arm comes forward. So I think that the issue is becoming such a small sort of area to try and get it right, where your arm has to come through at the exact right time to make a tackle. Otherwise, it's either considered a swinging arm or it's considered a no arms tackle. And I think that was a sort of an incident where even the commentator was saying that they didn't quite feel it was a penalty. It's kind of towing the line. But if that becomes a penalty every time, and even a little bit worse than that becomes a yellow card, for me, it just sets a very dangerous precedent. We are seeing so many cards at the moment. I mean, it's very rare when I'm watching again. I actually don't see a yellow card, and that's sad because growing up, it was like such a rare thing. Like, oh my goodness, it's a yellow card. This is quite interesting. Whereas now, it's just like, we saw 3 yellow cards in the Scotland versus Italy game, which also just finished now. And I think that's a very, very difficult part. Speaking of yellows, Rasha Wenger sent off the wrong player today. What is the point of having TMO if you cannot involve and say, listen, you sent off the wrong player? I couldn't actually believe it. Just before Dylan Richardson scored the try, the Lions were guilty of stopping 3 mauls in a row. And the second one, they broke off and Andrea tried to stop the maul. And then Rasha Wenger, and look, I think Carly Sardi probably did commit a penalty, kind of came from the side, but it was before the maul had even broken off. And then they broke off from him towards the try line. That's when Andrea came in from the side and they went over. Rasha Wenger said that maul was travelling at a rate of knots. You cannot do that. Stop it. Yellow card. And then gave the card to Carly Sardi. I mean, how do you just card the wrong player? And as the TMO, how do you not watch the replay and think, listen, Rasta, you've got the wrong player? I mean, Carly Sardi is having a fantastic game and you lose him for 10 minutes because you got the wrong player. I mean, you cannot be making those sort of mistakes. That's really, really poor. And then I want to talk about the Richardson try. And even the maul, which I thought, could have been shifting lines. Because I struggle with mauls because I think it's become something that's so difficult to stop because of the way the law is. As soon as, you have to come through the middle, you have to sort of dominate and it can't swivel up. But the problem is, the Sharks sort of line up with maul was kind of swiveling out and then it kind of broke off. And that there's a whole law about the sort of changing lane, the fact that you have to stick to a lane so that you can't just hit up. Because that's the problem. You've got all the Lions players who are over there. And then as soon as you wrap around, suddenly the Lions players are going through there and you've bypassed 6-7 players. And of course you're going to then go rampantly over the try line, which is why that law is in place. You cannot change your lane. So it was a little bit sort of edging there. But the one I thought was quite interesting was the second try where he went short and he ran over Andre Warner and then went over. Because he was tackled and then eventually sort of went over the line and placed. Now the rule says you are allowed to place the ball. The only thing that I think was quite interesting, and something that I'm quite interested to see what people think, is that when he was tackled, because usually you sort of go down and you've got one opportunity to place. And if you don't get it there, you can't make a double movement. But he had gone down, and the sort of movement we usually would have placed, he was basically in the tackle. So he had gone down, and it was like 1 or 2 seconds before he actually then eventually went over and placed the ball and got it down. So for me, again, a little bit of grey area where you're allowed to place the ball, but, is there a time limit? Is there it has to be the same sort of momentum? You have to go down and then place the ball, because he kind of went down, was almost down again, and then placed. So there was like those sort of 1-2 second gap. And Lukhanyo Ahmed, I think it was, came from behind him and helped carry him over. So that's why they're saying that there was, the momentum wasn't him. He didn't create new momentum, basically. But I think that's something that was quite an interesting sort of illustration of where that law could possibly be a little bit ambiguous in terms of, how to what point can you place a ball? How long until you cannot place and it's considered a second movement? Because you're allowed to place, but surely you cannot go down wait a couple of seconds, wait for maybe the player who's tackling to have moved slightly, and then suddenly go, cool, I can open and then place, which wasn't exactly the case, but I do think that's something that's a bit of a grey area. A brilliant try I'm reading by Similani, a pretty poor, I think it was Curran Bosch with the kick. Players that stood out for me, I thought Sika Buzanocha was quite industrious. Dylan Richardson was everywhere when he came on. Vincent Tuka, in fact, the entire pack for Lions, the loose trio for Lions, I thought was very good. But MJ Palser was particularly impressive. Tiaan Swaanpeoel, I thought was pretty ordinary, to be honest. I thought 3 tries, I think he could have maybe done a bit better. The Verticock one's difficult, that's the bounce of the ball. Thought he had to do something a bit better for that Tuka Mkuno try. Salembi for the Lions, I thought getting far too much space out wide. Penke tries very hard, but maybe isn't quite the finished product, so I think he's someone that probably needs a little bit of work. But apart from that, preseason games, I'm not going to get too sort of into it and sort of rip it apart too much. But let me know what you thought of the game down in the comments below. Do smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steven, and I'll chat to you very soon.